Let me tell you something that probably won't come as a shock. More than half of everything the average person in the UK eats, measured by calorie intake, comes from ultra-processed food. More than half. That's not a fringe finding. That's from the National Diet and Nutrition Survey. That's about all of us. And yet, if you've been anywhere near nutrition news recently, the phrase ultra-processed probably makes you feel one of two things, either vaguely guilty or mildly confused about what it actually is you're supposed to be guilty about. So welcome to, or welcome back to, the new 5 a day. I'm Nick Walters. This is the second episode under the Eat Well pillar, and today we're asking the question that's quietly become one of the most important topics in public health. How do you actually eat well in a world where ultra-processed food is everywhere? We're not here to try to scare you off your cereal or make you feel terrible about last Tuesday's ready meal. We're here to look at what the evidence actually says and to come out the other side with something genuinely useful. Okay? Let's go. Right. First things first. What actually is an ultra-processed food? Because the term gets bandied around a lot, and it's worth being precise. Now, the classification that most researchers used is called NOVA, N-O-V-A, which was developed by an awesome team in Brazil. It divides food into 4 groups based on how much industrial processing has happened to it. Now, at one end, we've got whole, minimally processed foods, an apple, a piece of salmon, an egg, plain oats, food that basically looks like what it was when the farmer was growing it. At the other end, ultra-processed foods. These are industrial formulations made mostly from substances extracted from food, and they typically contain ingredients you'd never find in a home kitchen: emulsifiers, stabilizers, artificial flavors and preservatives, sweeteners, colorings, combinations of added fat and sugar that have been precisely engineered to make the product as appealing as possible. Examples: most mass-produced bread, most breakfast cereals, ready meals, biscuits, fizzy drinks, processed meat, most snack foods. Now, here's the important nuance. Not every processed food is ultra-processed. A tin of tomatoes, minimally processed. Frozen peas, frozen at harvest, nutritionally excellent. Plain yogurt, that's just fine. A tub of hummus looks good. These things have been processed, but lightly and in ways that preserve their nutritional value rather than industrially transforming them. The question isn't whether something has been processed, it's how much and what has been added. A simple rule of thumb: if the ingredient list is long, contains lots of unfamiliar additives, and you couldn't roughly recreate it at home from real ingredients, then, well, it's probably ultra-processed. So, how about the evidence? What does a diet high in ultra-processed food actually do to your health? Because this is where the conversation gets serious and where it also can get a little bit overstated sometimes. So let me try to give you a straight, honest version. The biggest review of the evidence was published in the BMJ in 2024. It synthesized 45 separate meta-analyses covering data from nearly 10 million people. And what it found was associations, significant, consistent associations, between high ultra-processed food consumption and 32 different adverse health outcomes. 32. You didn't hear me wrong there. Now, these include cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, depression and anxiety, several cancers, and overall higher risk of dying from any cause. In the same year, the UK's Parliament's own scientific advisory panel reviewed the evidence and reached the same conclusion. Regular, high consumption of UPFs is linked to worse health outcomes across multiple body systems. Now, that's a significant, substantial body of evidence, and it's worth taking it seriously. But here's what makes the story more interesting than just processed food bad. In 2019, a team of researchers in the US ran a controlled inpatient trial. Here's what they did. They took 20 adults, admitted them into a clinical research facility, and fed one group an ultra-processed diet, and the other group an unprocessed diet for 2 weeks, and then swapped them over. Now, crucially, both diets were matched. Same total calories on offer, same proportions of fat, carbohydrate, protein, same sugar, same sodium, same fiber. The only variable was the degree of processing. Now, the people on the ultra-processed diet consumed around 500 extra calories per day. They ate faster and they gained weight. The people on the unprocessed diet, also eating as much as they want, well, they lost weight. Something about the processing itself, beyond all the variables we usually blame, something about that processing affected how much people ate, and that's a remarkable finding. Now, let's add some honest caveats, because this is exactly the kind of story that gets oversimplified in the headlines. Most of the evidence is observational. It shows associations. It doesn't prove that ultra-processing directly causes these outcomes. People who eat a lot of UPFs often differ from those who don't in many other ways as well. Income, stress, sleep, access to fresh food. Now, researchers try to control for these factors, but they can't control for everything. The NOVA classification itself has also been criticized for lumping together very different products. A tin of baked beans is technically ultra-processed. It's a tin of beans. So is a pot of yogurt. Come on now. The evidence is strongest for processed meats, sugary drinks, and industrially processed baked goods and snacks. It's not every food with an E number in it. So take the evidence seriously, but don't catastrophize it. That's the calibration here. Now, let's talk about why ultra-processed foods are so easy to eat too much of. Because understanding this takes a lot of the shame out of the equation. These foods have been specifically engineered to be appealing. The combination of salt, fat, sugar, and texture, it's not accidental. It's the product of enormous industrial investment in making food that's harder to stop eating. They tend to be low in protein and fiber, the two things most responsible for making you feel genuinely full. They're often eaten quickly, which means your body's satiety signals arrive after you've already had more than you needed. This isn't a character flaw. This is the food working as designed. And the longer-term issue is displacement. When a big proportion of your calories comes from ultra-processed food, there is mechanically less room for the things with the strongest evidence for health benefits. Vegetables, fruit, legumes, whole grains, nuts, fish. It's not just that UPFs are harmful in themselves, it's that they push out the things that are protective. If you've ever noticed that a packet of crisps doesn't fill you up the same way that a handful of nuts does, that's not your imagination talking there. The foods are doing different things to your appetite system. And over the years, these differences, well, they add up. So here's what I want to say before we get to the practical suggestions. The way ultra-processed foods dominate modern diets is not primarily a story of individual failure. It's a story about environment. These foods are cheap. They are convenient. They have long shelf lives. They're heavily marketed. They're often the most available and the most affordable option. And often, let's be honest, they're pretty darn tasty. And that's particularly true for households who are on tight budgets, for people who are working long hours, for anyone without easy access to well-stocked shops, or without time to cook. The message that everyone should cook everything from scratch is not only unrealistic, it's also not what the science supports. What the science actually supports is pattern. It looks at the overall pattern across the week and across months. A person who has a ready meal on a Tuesday, but otherwise eats plenty of vegetables, some whole grains, reasonable protein, a varied diet, is in a genuinely different position from someone whose every meal is dominated by heavily manufactured foods. One Tuesday ready meal is not the problem. The whole week and the pattern over the week is what matters. So you've been feeling vaguely guilty every time you pick up a packet. That guilt is probably not serving you. What serves you is awareness and direction, which is what we're going to get to now. Now, if you follow nutrition news, you will probably have noticed that ultra-processed foods are having a bit of a moment right now. Chris Van Tulleken has written a book about them. There are documentaries, there are op-eds every other week. And some of the coverage is excellent. But some of it nudges into territory that isn't quite supported by the evidence. So let's be clear about what we do and do not know. We know that diets high in ultra-processed foods are consistently associated with worse health outcomes in large populations. We know from at least one well-run controlled trial that degree of processing affects calorie intake even when nutrients are matched. We know that UPF heavy diets tend to displace more nutritious foods. The signal is real, replicated, and significant. What we don't know yet is exactly which mechanisms explain this. How much of the effect is driven by the processing itself versus poor nutrient profiles of most UPFs? And precisely which types of processing are more harmful? The science is moving fast, but the conclusions are still being refined. What remains consistent underneath the noise: eat more whole and minimally processed foods. Eat fewer heavily manufactured ones. Look at the overall pattern rather than individual products. And above all, don't let perfection be the enemy of being much better. These principles haven't changed. These principles won't change. Right, let's move on to the practical bit. The goal isn't zero ultra-processed foods. That isn't realistic, it isn't what the evidence demands, and it would make eating miserable and socially complicated in ways that would have their own health costs. The goal is a diet where whole and minimally processed foods make up a larger proportion of what you eat, and the heavily manufactured ones a smaller proportion. As always, 5 approaches. Pick just one or 2 of them, not all 5 at once. Number 1, add before you subtract. Rather than starting by cutting things out of your daily diet, try adding something nourishing first. An extra portion of vegetables at dinner, a piece of fruit in the morning, a handful of nuts instead of a biscuit at 3 o'clock. When whole foods take up more space, processed ones naturally take up less. And you haven't had to use willpower or to feel deprived. Number 2, make peace with convenient whole foods. This is important. Frozen vegetables, tinned fish, tinned beans, plain yogurt, eggs, pre-cooked grains, all minimally processed, all affordable, all fast. If your default when you're tired or busy is a heavily processed ready meal, having one of these minimally processed alternatives available means you have a better default to fall back on. It's not perfect, but it's great. It's better. Number 3, watch the drinks. Now, this one is underrated. Sugary soft drinks and energy drinks are among the most consistently problematic UPFs in the evidence base. Swapping sweetened drinks for water, sparkling water, tea or coffee without added sugar is one of the highest impact changes you can make. And it's often the one people least expect. Number 4, look at your defaults. Don't blame your exceptions. The foods you eat habitually, your standard breakfast, your regular work lunch, the snack you reach for without thinking. These all have far more impact on your overall diet than the occasional Friday night takeaway or that slice of birthday cake in the office. Improving your defaults is more effective than trying to police every exception. Now, number 5, read the ingredient list occasionally. Not obsessively, but as a general exercise in awareness. A short list of recognizable ingredients is a good sign. A long list of unfamiliar additives and scientific sounding components is a useful red flag. You don't need to memorize E-numbers. You just need a general sense of what's in the things you eat most often. Now, eat well is pillar 2 of the new 5 a day. And the ultra-processed food story is really just a more detailed version of the same message. What you eat consistently over time shapes how well you feel and how long you stay healthy. Not individual meals, not individual products, but the overall pattern. The science on ultra-processed foods is serious enough to take notice of. It is also not an instruction to panic. There is no moral failure in a world where more than half of available food has been heavily manufactured. There is just an opportunity to nudge things gradually in a better direction. More whole foods, more variety, fewer industrial formulations in the center of the diet. That's it. That's the whole message. Now, if you want the full science, the mechanisms, the specific studies, and the caveats, there's a companion deep dive post on our website at www.new5aday.com. That's with the number 5, along with a full citations list for everything we've covered today. Now, next episode, we're going to go back to pillar 3, be active, and take a look at the wide range of benefits from stretching and how you can build a simple stretching regime into your busy daily life. Now, if this episode has been useful, please like, follow, and share so that your contacts can hear this as well. Now, take care of yourselves and eat well.